right. So we're diving deep today
Deep.
into critical thinking. And wow, you've really gone all out with the research. Articles, papers, impressive. We're going to help you break it all down and find those critical thinking gems that'll make you a sharper thinker. Before we get into all the specifics, let's just level set. What exactly is critical thinking? It's one of those phrases, right? We hear it all the time.
Right.
But do we really know what it means?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a term that gets thrown around a lot. Yeah. And I think sometimes it gets misunderstood. I think at its core, critical thinking is about actively engaging with information. It's not just passively taking in facts, but actually analyzing them, questioning them, and forming your own conclusions based on evidence and reason.
So it's not about just being critical,
right,
or negative, or finding flaws all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not about being a nitpicker or just trying to find fault with everything. It's more about being a curious investigator.
I like that.
Really examining the information carefully, looking at it from different angles, and considering all sides of an issue before forming an opinion.
So why is this skill so important, especially today? It feels like there's so much information coming at us from everywhere.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, think about it. We are constantly bombarded with information from all sides, especially online. Social media, news articles, blogs, everyone has an opinion. It's really easy to just get swept up in all of that noise.
Right.
So critical thinking gives you that ability to, step back, assess information objectively, and decide for yourself what you believe.
So it's almost like having a built-in BS detector. You can kind of sift through all that information and figure out.
Like a filter.
Yeah, like a filter.
It helps you separate fact from fiction. It helps you identify biases and agendas, and ultimately make more informed decisions in all areas of your life.
That feels very empowering. It's like you're taking back control of your own thoughts and beliefs.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to not only understand what critical thinking is, but also develop those skills and tools to actually apply it effectively. Think of it like a mental toolbox, we're going to equip you with.
Nice.
We'll be exploring those tools a little bit later, but first, let's talk about some of those common barriers to critical thinking. Those mental traps that...
Right, because we all have them.
We all fall prey to from time to time.
Definitely. Okay, mental traps.
Yeah.
What are some of those traps we should be looking out for?
Well, one of the biggest ones is bias.
Okay.
We all have biases, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of like those mental shortcuts that our brains use to process information quickly. But they can lead us to, jump to conclusions or ignore evidence that doesn't really fit our pre-existing beliefs.
So it's like looking at the world with, tinted glasses, right?
That's a great analogy.
You don't even know that the color's off.
Exactly. And confirmation bias is a great example of that, where we tend to seek out and favor information that confirms what we already believe, and we kind of dismiss anything that challenges our views. And that's especially, prevalent online.
Totally. And it's so easy to get stuck in those echo chambers.
Absolutely. Those echo chambers where everyone's agreeing with you.
Yeah.
And it just reinforces your own.
Yeah. You feel so smart.
Exactly.
But you might be totally wrong.
Right. And then there's that always right bias.
Oh, yeah.
Where people have an almost unshakable belief that they're correct.
Oh, I know some people like that.
Right. It's they just have a really hard time accepting that they might be wrong, even when presented with, pretty good evidence to the contrary.
It's got to be hard to have a real conversation with someone like that.
It leads to those circular arguments where no one is really listening or willing to change their mind.
In one of the articles, there's a really interesting point about framing.
Yeah.
And how framing can really subtly influence our opinions.
Absolutely.
Something about stray dogs.
Oh, yes. That's a great example of how the way information is presented can really shape how we see things.
Okay.
So imagine there's this proposed law to capture and euthanize stray dogs, right? And to kind of gain public support, they might emphasize how aggressive those dogs are, how dangerous they are, especially to children.
So instead of focusing on animal welfare, they're making it about safety.
Exactly. They're playing on people's fears, creating this like false dichotomy. Yeah. It's like either we get rid of the dogs or our children are at risk.
Right.
And a critical thinker would be able to see through that, right? They would question, how valid are those claims? Are there other solutions that we could be considering?
Wow, it's kind of scary how easily we can be swayed by that framing without even realizing it.
And we see it all the time, like in advertising, politics, even everyday conversations. So being aware of those framing techniques is really essential for being a critical thinker.
Okay, so we've got bias, framing, any other pitfalls we need to look out for?
Yeah, another big one is logical fallacies.
Oh?
Those are like flaws in reasoning that can make an argument sound really convincing on the surface, but they're not actually logically sound.
So it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks all nice and friendly.
Exactly.
But it's actually going to like mess with you.
Yeah, it's going to mess with your thinking. There are so many different types of fallacies, but a common one is the appeal to popularity.
Okay.
Like assuming that something must be true just because a lot of people believe it.
Oh, yeah. Like everyone's doing it.
Exactly.
So it must be right.
Just because something's trending on social media doesn't mean it's accurate or reliable.
Right. Like fashion trends come and go.
And another common one is the ad hominem attack.
Okay.
Where someone attacks the person making the argument instead of the argument itself.
Oh, cool. I see that all the time online.
All the time.
It's like instead of actually engaging with the issues, it's just like name calling.
It's a distraction tactic, right? They're trying to discredit the person without actually having to like engage with their ideas.
So if we're aware of these fallacies, we can kind of like spot them when they're happening, or maybe even when we're using them, right?
It's like having that mental shield against manipulative rhetoric.
Okay, so we talked about bias, framing, fallacies. What's the last one?
The last roadblock we should talk about is conspiracy theories.
Oh, yeah.
Those beliefs that certain events or situations are being controlled by, like, powerful, hidden forces.
It does feel like there's a lot more conspiracy theories.
Yeah, it seems like they're
floating around these days.
They're everywhere, and they can be really tempting to believe, right?
Right.
They offer these, like, simple explanations for really complex events, and they often tap into our fears and our distrust of authority.
Right. Okay.
But the problem is they're often based on like speculation, conjecture, misinformation, rather than solid evidence.
So how do we know if a conspiracy theory is like...
That's a great question.
...actually worth, paying attention to?
Yeah, and that's where critical thinking comes in, We need to evaluate those claims very carefully. Look for verifiable evidence and consider the source of the information, right? Is this coming from a reputable source, or is it coming from an anonymous person online,
Right. Right, someone with an agenda.
So it's not about just like dismissing all conspiracy theories. It's about approaching them with like healthy skepticism.
Exactly. Like if someone's claiming the earth is flat, or vaccines cause autism, we need to ask, what's the evidence?
Yeah.
Who's saying this? What are their motives?
And if they're not answering your questions?
Exactly.
Or they're just like attacking you personally.
Okay, red flag.
That's a red flag. Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to remember that like, even if someone believes in a conspiracy theory, it doesn't mean they're like a bad person.
They might just be misinformed.
Yeah.
Or, they've encountered misinformation online.
So instead of like getting defensive or writing them off, we should try to like have a conversation with them. Exactly. Engage in a respectful dialogue, maybe help them see things from a different perspective.
Because at the end of the day, it's about finding the truth.
Exactly. Critical thinking is about seeking truth and understanding, not just winning an argument.
Well said. Okay. So we've gone through the roadblocks, the pitfalls.
Yeah.
Now let's get to like the good stuff.
The tools.
The tools, like how to actually be better thinkers.
Yeah.
It feels like we've done all this like mental cleaning, getting rid of all the bad habits.
Yeah.
Now I'm ready for like the new tools, the upgrades.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, the upgrades.
It's time to open up that toolbox. Right. And remember, these aren't just like abstract concepts. These are real techniques you can use every day to get better at thinking.
I like it. So there were 6 key tools mentioned.
Okay.
Where do we start? What's the first one we should look at?
Okay, so the first one let's talk about is Socratic questioning. It's named after, Socrates, the Greek philosopher.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't he the guy who was always asking everyone questions in Athens? Kind of annoying everyone.
Yeah, he had a reputation for that. But, his method was brilliant.
Okay.
It's all about asking those probing questions
Right.
that really challenge assumptions,
Yeah.
Get to the heart of an issue.
So instead of just like taking in the information, you're like pushing back, you're digging deeper.
You're actively engaging, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So for example, imagine you're reading an article that says, climate change is a hoax.
Okay.
A Socratic question would be like, well, what evidence do they have for that?
Okay.
Or are there other explanations that they haven't considered? Or
Yeah.
even like, what are the consequences of ignoring, the scientific consensus on climate change?
Those are some really like pointed questions.
Right.
I can see how that would make you really...
It forces you to think more deeply.
Think about it, yeah.
Exactly. It exposes weaknesses in an argument.
Okay.
It helps you identify bias.
Right.
And ultimately arrive at like a better understanding.
Okay, Socratic questioning. That one's going in my toolbox for sure.
Absolutely.
What about the next one? What else do we have?
All right, next up, let's talk about mind mapping.
Okay.
This is a great one
Yeah.
for visual learners.
Oh, I love visual.
Yeah, so it's great for brainstorming,
Okay.
organizing information, making connections between ideas.
Tell me more.
Okay, so imagine you're trying to understand like
Yeah.
a really complex topic, like, I don't know, the history of the Roman Empire.
Okay.
So instead of just like reading a textbook,
Right.
you could create a mind map, right? You start with Roman Empire in the center.
Okay.
And then you branch out to like different key themes, like military conquests, political structures, social life.
Oh, I see.
And then you add sub-branches with like specific details and dates and key figures.
So it's kind of like a web, like a visual web.
Exactly. It's a web of information.
Okay.
It's much more engaging than just like traditional linear notes.
I can see how that would like help you see the big picture.
Yeah, it helps you make those connections.
Much easier, yeah.
Okay, so that's mind mapping.
Mind mapping. Okay, what's number 3?
Number 3 is argument mapping.
Argument mapping. Okay.
This one's really useful when you're like analyzing an argument or trying to build a persuasive argument.
Ooh, so like if I'm having a debate with someone about like artificial intelligence, I could use this.
That's a great example because argument mapping helps you break down the argument into its key components.
Okay.
So the main claim,
Yeah.
the supporting reasons, the evidence,
Yeah.
and then any counter arguments.
So you can see if the reasons actually like support the claim and the evidence is like real.
Is it reliable?
Yeah, and like have they really addressed the counter arguments?
Yeah, exactly. It forces you to think about the logic of it,
Not just, like, whether you agree or not.
Exactly. Oh, that's good. Okay.
All right, that was argument mapping.
Okay, argument mapping. I'm seeing how these are all, like, working together.
Yeah, they all kind of...
to be a better fit.
They all fit together, yeah.
What's next?
Okay, number 4, we have problem and solution mapping.
Problem and solution mapping. Okay.
This one's all about tackling real-world problems.
I like this. This is like taking action.
This is about taking action.
Yeah.
So you start by clearly defining the problem.
Okay.
Gathering information.
Yeah.
Analyzing the causes and effects.
Right.
And then brainstorming potential solutions.
So it's not just like complaining.
No, it's about...
It's about doing something.
Yeah, it's about taking a systematic approach.
I like it.
You're thinking strategically, weighing the pros and cons.
Yeah.
Coming up with a plan of action.
Nice. Okay, what else? What are the last 2?
Okay, number 5 is the cause and effect diagram. Cause and effect diagram, all right?
This one's great for understanding complex systems and figuring out the root causes of problems.
This sounds a little scientific.
It is a little bit, but let me give you an example.
Okay.
So let's say you're dealing with like employee turnover at your company.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of just assuming that people are leaving for more money,
right.
You can use this diagram to really explore all the potential factors.
Okay.
So you might consider things like management style, company culture, workload, opportunities for growth, even the physical work environment.
So you're like a detective. You're looking for clues.
Exactly. You're trying to trace it back.
Oh, that's good.
To the source of the problem.
I like that.
So you can come up with more effective solutions.
All right, what's the last one?
Okay, the final tool is the anticipation guide.
Anticipation guide, okay.
And this one's pretty simple.
Yeah.
But it's powerful, and you use it before you read an article or a book chapter, watch a documentary.
So like a warm-up.
It's like a warm-up for your brain, yeah.
Okay.
So before you start reading, take a minute to think about the topic.
Okay.
What do you already know? What are your initial thoughts?
Right.
What questions do you have?
Okay.
You can even write down some predictions about what the author might say.
Yeah, because then you're already, like, thinking about it.
Exactly.
You're not just passively reading.
You're actively engaging.
Right. Okay.
And it helps you focus your attention.
Yeah.
Identify key points.
Okay.
Retain the information better.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
My toolbox is, like, overflowing right now.
I know, right? But the key is to practice. You got to use these tools.
Yeah.
Make them a habit.
Like anything, right? It's like learning an instrument or something.
It takes time and effort.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
It is. It is.
So here's a question for you to think about.
Okay.
What's one area of your life where you could use these tools?
That's a good question.
Right.
We have to think about that one.
Yeah, something to ponder.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all this.
Of course.
I feel like a much better thinker already.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next time.